Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the Binge Worthy Podcast series. I am Nate, and this is G. Oliver, and we've been doing this thing for a minute, and I need for somebody to pick this shit up because, yeah,
We live,
uh,
baby.
we've been talking a lot. We got a number of hours in. Uh, we both hard workers, but it's time. So we have three stories today, but I want to open it up with um, one. I rewatched the Clone movie, and I've come to the con. I'm not going to be negative, but I've come to the conclusion I have to watch that when it's a blizzard outside because I can't keep my attention, and maybe it's a me problem. It's probably me, but I have to watch that when it's like horrible rain and my mind isn't creatively moving. Because
What
I
is
sit
this?
down today and I tried to watch Getting Up.
What show is this?
That is the Jamie Foxx movie,
Oh, we clone
the one we
Tyrone. They
talked
clone
about.
Tyrone. Oh, you
Yeah, we
still
closed
haven't got
Tyrone,
to
right?
it, huh?
I watched it. I watched it all the way through the first time, but when I tried to sit down and watch that today, I just it wasn't even that it was bad, but it's
Hmm?
moving at a pace where it should have been a mini series and not a
Really?
movie for me.
Hmm.
Better had we made it, had they made it a mini, like a short series or a short, you know how they do the short season, like if they would have did it that way, so
Yeah,
we
like
can see the
a magnificent
changes
series.
and the transitions happening.
Yeah. Oh man, I loved it as a movie.
So you watched it at the movie theater?
Nah, this came out. I don't think it came out in theaters. It was
Okay,
a Netflix. It's a Netflix original. So it
okay,
came straight to Netflix.
yeah, that's where I
So
saw that on Netflix.
yeah.
It just I need to be some movies like I'm not a person that can just sit down and watch. There's only certain movies I'll say it like that. There's only certain movies I can sit down. Like I can sit down and watch The Color Purple start to finish, no
Yeah,
problem.
I mean, you
It's just certain things.
like, it's not your genre, like right, like it. This is more of a science fictiony, um, it kind
I
of
mean I like science
different genre,
fiction. I
but
like science fiction. It just this particularly I feel like it's moving fast, and I need to be in a space where I don't want to move and I just want to sit on the couch and chill. Let me move this over so y'all don't see my hamper. But but yeah, I get it. Like I because I couldn't sit down and watch that, I went over and watched Ma Rainey's Black Bottom instead. Watched it all the way through.
mm,
So it's just certain things that have to watch a certain way. So
that's interesting.
anything you watched that stood
I'd
out?
be interested to know what it was about this particular movie that you felt like was moving too fast. Yeah, I had a very different reaction and experience with it.
Hmm.
But yeah, we got some things to talk about, man. The blind side turned out to be a whole lie, and that's a big controversy right now. And
Hmm.
Netflix got some new shit out called Painkillers. Uh,
Yes.
yeah, so we're gonna discuss that. And what's the one you were talking about with the documentary? I don't think I saw it. And I
In our
garden.
mother's gardens,
Mhm.
it's a series of black women speaking either with their mothers or about their mothers and grandmothers. And I am definitely a grandmother's boy.
Mm.
And it just the title alone just made me watch it. So I went to the grocery store and I was putting the groceries away, and I started watching it. So I haven't even gotten through it, but it is definitely. if you had a big mama or a grandmother or a G mama or a nana or a nona or whatever Gigi, if you were that person growing up, this is a documentary I think you would love. It is something that yeah. I've had my grandmother on my head for a minute now, so it just made me think of that. But it's faces that you know. It's some faces a lot of faces that you don't know, but they're all is in a documentary format where they're being interviewed and they're telling stories and giving like passing down some of that wisdom that they've learned. And some of them have some really interesting stories. One of the young ladies was talking about how her mom was shot, and because her mom was shot in her stomach, she when she went to the hospital, that's how they found out that her mother was pregnant with her, and her
Mm.
mother hid the story from her because she didn't want her daughter to feel like she was an afterthought or was the cause of stuff. But it was the stories are just I love them, and now I'm in a space of I'm creating a. I went to 80th birthday party of my cousin's grandmother, and I've known this lady forever. Me and my cousin the same age, so I've known this lady forever, and to see how much energy she had at 80 years old was just crazy to me. But first time I ever went over her house, I was really young, and I broke the screen door. She lives down in the Dundalk, Essex area, and she had this porch, this enclosed porch, and me and my cousin's sister, older sister, we were playing, and the door shut, and my arm went through the screen door. So I had not been after the party was over. We went and sit down back at her house with her, and I she has two houses on one property, so she lives in the other house now. That house wasn't there when I was younger, so I went to took a picture of the old house that she's not living there anymore, and it
Mm-hmm.
just all these memories came back of me crying because I broke the screen window, and I created an art show based off of screen doors, and it's gonna be real dope. So stay tuned, 2024. It's gonna be an awesome year. But yeah, that's been where I was at, and that documentary just made me. This was confirmation that I should be doing it. So
All right, all right.
yeah.
Getting signs from your views, from your viewing pleasures. So man, the blind side.
Yeah.
All right. So for y'all that don't know, if you saw the movie The Blind Side, which is the what we thought was true story of Baltimore Ravens NFL player Michael Orr, tells this wonderful story about him coming from a
Hmm.
really rough environment, being adopted by a white family who then supports him through his football career and whatnot. This week, Michael Orr has filed a lawsuit against the family that adopted him. Apparently, never adopted him officially.
Hmm.
What they did was he's claiming that they tricked him by making him think that they were adopting him, but what they actually did was have him sign over his financial rights and a conservatorship
Hmm.
that they are still the executors of, which means that they have, if not total control, definitely major control over his finances, his income. They have essentially made
His
money
likeness.
off of him, including, I would guess, the movie The Blind Side. It's going to be really interesting um, to see what Sandra Bullock has to say about this. Um, but yeah, man, turns out The Blind Side might be a big fat lie. Call it
Well,
The
I
Blind
mean,
Side.
I remember when it came out. It was a very. Some of the friends and I who went to go see the movie, it felt real cringy.
Mm-hmm.
Because you have this white family that takes in this black child and seemingly pushes him into success. That's
Mm-hmm.
how it kind of came off. and it
No,
was a
that's
little
essentially what the
cringy,
story was.
right?
That's
So
essentially
to
what.
see now that he is filing a laws, he's suing them basically to get back his name because they've made in his words millions of dollars off the back of his career and his hard work, and he's not in control of any of it.
Mm,
So they haven't spoken out. The family hasn't spoken. Well, those people, as they come to find out, they're not family. They have none of them have spoken out, and it's really, it really speaks on that whole foster care system, how something like this could happen and nobody is monitoring. Um, because you can be a foster parent, but until they find that child home, they stay with you. So if they never find them placement, they're with you unless you
mm,
decide to give them back or terminate the foster care agreement for that child. But it is for you to find out because he's not no young child. So for you to find out all these things have happened and you have no control over it, it takes us back to
mm,
the whole Britney Spears situation. Like, how can someone do this to you legally?
mm.
Oh, we saw with Wendy Williams as well. How can someone do something like that and take control of your money, your assets? In his case, his likeness. They have a whole movie that's been out. It's not like a new movie,
Mm-hmm.
but I just remember it feeling a little cringy watching it.
Right. So I don't remember like feeling particularly cringy. I do think it came out. It came out. I feel like in that time where people were starting to question the intention of like consistently throwing those types of movies with the
Right.
white savior. Um, and so I think a lot of people were aware and like really kind of questioning that whole thing.
Hmm.
Because I remember the movie came out where there was just a lot going on around like race related movies. Um, you know, with
We had already had the movie Losing Isaiah, something that
well
felt a little similar.
that came a long time before
I'm just saying, but that movie had
Isaiah was in
it
the
didn't
night.
it
But
wasn't
no, I
exact type of
like
story, but
there was this point in time where a lot of the films that just dealt with race relations, they were getting criticized for various reasons, right? Like you had movies like The Help and The Butler,
hmm
just helping the butler, these subservient roles, where they're trying to tell these glorious stories through these servants. And then you had the slave movies. Um,
hmm
and I think the Blind Side really just got caught up in that. At the time, it kind of came out in the midst of this kind of like just this point in this very like limited point in time where we were really collectively questioning like what is the goal, what is the overall agenda to keep pushing these particular narratives as opposed to narratives of black independence and black autonomy existing without the throes of white supremacy, regardless of how they're being categorized. Like this came out around at the same time, like movies like Green Book, and
hmm
yeah. So like, but I remember, like some people hated it, some people liked it, some people were like like myself, like in the middle. Like I didn't really particularly think that it was any type of special film. I also don't remember walking away thinking, "Oh, that was horrible." It was kind of like me. But just like to find out that you know this movie has been made where they tell this story in a very specific way, which includes him being adopted by this family, and then to find out that it was just all. It seems to be, at least from his allegation, his side of it, very profit motivated, very very
so they
intentional.
probably never adopted him. they probably just had him like in the foster parent space.
Yeah, but that's the problem. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, there are plenty of foster kids that go through understanding that this is a foster parent. In the movie, it was like this big thing where, like, we want to adopt you, we want to make it official, we want to make you an official part of our family. Um, and it sounds like they went through those motions but never officially completed the process, and may have intentionally made him feel like, because I mean, you tell a 17, 18-year-old kid, hey, we want to adopt you, even if they look at the paperwork, do they really understand it, do they really understand what that means, those types of things. um, so, someone asked me, I was speaking with someone about it recently, and they was like, why is he doing this now? They're like, yo, it's very realistic that he just finding out. You know what I mean? How many kids really question that? You know what I'm saying? Like, you already in this sucky situation, and then you find you one of the lucky ones, right? That finds the family that wants to, like, officially take you out of that situation. Um,
So
you know.
so a couple things. So a couple things. So
Mhm.
his petition to the court, O'Hare's alleged that the is
The
it the Tui
the,
family?
the Tuies,
This
Tui
the
family.
Tui family deceived him of his legal family status and exploited his life for financial gain. He requested they stop using his likeness and his name in addition to back pay for money he may not he may be owed. So fact from Michael says he never received any money from the movie.
Mm,
And he was very upset that his likeness was used, but also it made him look like he was not intelligent.
mm,
So they probably convinced him or did it behind his back, uh, making this film. But once he saw it, it was like, that's not even me. You making up a story about me.
mm.
But this is stuff that he's been alleging. Like it is heartbreaking. As someone who grew up in my mother was a foster care, uh, and then eventually adopted all the children that she had in foster care. But it it is hurtful that you deceive someone this way, and he probably don't even know. Probably after this investigation that's happening right now, he probably don't even know the extent of how much money they've made. And his petition basically says he wants them to stop using his name.
Mhm.
So I don't know if it's clear if it's a legal conservatorship that
Right.
they have over him,
That's what
or
it sounds like, and that's what I've heard. That's how I've heard people refer to it.
right,
Um, that's what it sounds like.
right,
You know what I
because
mean?
I think legally take you can be a conservative over someone's estate or person
Mm.
if they feel like something's wrong or something's dangerous going on or they're not able to take care of themselves in a way. So I don't know what
And I don't
happened.
even
Like,
know.
was
I don't.
this signed during when he was underage? Because if he
So
was underage, they wouldn't have needed him to do it. They could have just went to court
I think
and
that a
made the
concern.
choice.
I think that his story. I think that there's more to, and I'm not a legal scholar or anything like that, but I think that there's more to the
Hmm.
conservatorship than than just simply those cases that we hear about quite often. We hear about it in
Right.
situations where, like, people are unwell, people might be a danger to themselves, like. But I think the idea is that you can enter into this arrangement when it's in someone's best interest, and that can be for a variety of reasons. A reason being,
Mm,
hey, you're talented enough to play at the national level in this sport, but you are technically still a minor, or for whatever reason, like, it would be in your best interest to have someone looking out for your financial interests from this, right? Um,
right. The
so,
way the
like,
so I saw it was a podcast that was talking about this, and they were speaking from the perspective of if he was on the spectrum,
Mm-hmm.
So when not saying that he is, but I know I was watching Sherry Shepherd's show, and her son is on the spectrum, and her fear is so legally right now she is placing herself as placing her son in a conservatorship where she would have authority because in the way things are now, the way the laws go, because he's an adult, no matter if he's on the spectrum or not, and being on the spectrum doesn't necessarily mean you're dumb or you can't have
Right.
any of your
Right.
faculties. It's just simply you're on a spectrum. So you may have a learning disability or you may have a delay like in speech or some type of development delay.
Mm-hmm.
So she would have to, while he's still in her care, get a conservatorship over him because some girl could come up and convince him to leave and, start making money off him because his mother is Sherry Shepherd or whatever have you, and take him away. And it'd be nothing that Shirley Shepherd could have done or a parent in that matter could do to gain control over her child or his safety. So
Right.
it is a legal process that can happen if your child has certain things going on,
Mm-hmm.
like being on the spectrum or having learning disabilities as a minor, and you can get that and have control over their conservatorship, or something like what's her name, Britney Spears, where she had a mental breakdown, and that's how her family won that conservatorship. I call it won the conservatorship because they went through her money and stuff like that. And then you hear a lot of child stars who have gone through the same thing with their actual parents. So this has to be crazy to realize there's a whole movie out there that was this movie was really promoted. It
Yeah,
didn't
it
do
was.
well. It had from looking at the reviews, they were kind of mixed reviews,
Yeah,
but
it was promoted as this
somebody
like
made some
feel
money off of
good
it.
movie. Come see the Blind Side. I remember all that shit.
Right. And they really promoted it here, but it just felt like it just felt cringy. And when I say cringy, it's not that I could foresee this happening, but
Mm-hmm.
anytime you're dealing with a story about somebody being in foster care or being adopted and it's a real story,
Mm-hmm.
I cringe a little bit because how much of that person are we really seeing? How much of this is this Hollywood? How much of this did you make up? Like, but you're
Right.
talking about a real person that was in that system. Like I still cringe watching what's the one? Not losing Isaiah, but it's the one where he was being molested by the foster kid's mother's daughter, and I can't even think of the name of
Oh,
that movie.
Antoine Fisher.
Antoine Fisher. So that this feels real Antoine Fisher to me now.
Nah. Yeah, I was just sitting back thinking, I'm like, yo, if there's like any truth to this, and or if this is what happened, the caucasity, man, like just to think that you can do that. No, I'm serious, yo.
That
Like
word needs to be in a dictionary for
the
real
caucasity, like to
because it's
think,
real.
because my whole thing is like, you thought you was really gonna get away with that, like you thought that wasn't gonna come out. Like you lied and told this boy that you adopted him, and you thought that was gonna play. It's like we talked about this like last week when we were talking about what we've been binge watching, right? And we had a whole
Hmm.
conversation about the show Suits, real big right
Yeah,
now. Like it's like a whole resurgence thing because it's
yeah.
on Netflix, it's on a couple of the streaming services now. I've been watching on
Where
Netflix.
did it start? What platform did it start on though? I don't remember
Oh,
which one it
I mean,
started.
when it was in syndication, it was a USA. It was on USA.
Oh, okay, okay,
So
okay.
now it's like it's like 9 seasons long. It's on Netflix. I think it's on another. It might be on Hulu or something like that. But
Hmm.
the whole premise is that this guy who's like a genius, right? He's like a naturally gifted genius, and
Hmm.
he's posing as a lawyer. Like he's
Yeah.
not a lawyer. He never graduated college. He didn't go to well, I think he graduated college, but he never went to law school. He's working at one of the top law firms like in the country, this fictional law firm that is only hires from Harvard graduates. He's never gone to Harvard. So he's living this fraud, and you watch him go through these motions and everything, and the whole time you're sitting there like, nigga, at some point this shit is gonna crash and burn. You cannot possibly feel like this can't have a happy ending. Like, you just know it's coming. You're just waiting for that other shoe to drop. So it's just like the caucasity of the whole situation, because like, to think that you're just gonna get away with, like, that's never gonna come out, and then to do it in that arena, right? Like, it's gonna be public. It's gonna be messy. Now they ducking calls from all of the publications. They probably meeting with somebody from media. They probably meeting with some legal people, trying to figure out how to tell the story the right
Mm-hmm.
way. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Or what they're strategizing, what their response is going to be. And it was just like, yo, like, what made you think you was going to be able to do that to somebody, like, essentially somebody that popular, somebody that successful, who's going to be in the spotlight, whose life is going to be under scrutiny? It's just, man, white people just be out here like, I can do it. I can do anything. And it's wild. It's wild. It really is. It's really wild. Like,
I mean,
I
it's
hope, I hope,
scary.
I hope if it's true, because it also could be a
Right.
misunderstanding. Relationships change, things change, perceptions change. It might just be inter family turmoil and beefing going on that has now spilled over into the public spotlight. It
But
could,
I
but
don't
if it's
remember
true,
seeing
but
him.
if it's true,
You know how when
yo, I hope
even
he go to
like
jail. I hope he get every penny
yeah,
I hope every penny that they have made from his likeness, from being in control of his money and taking their share. I
yeah.
just I like, I
I
hope
mean,
they.
the idea of their share, like what? How is it their share? And it's his story, but it's hard to even
Well, I mean, like,
fathom that
typically, like,
someone could do this to you, but
mhm,
someone that was trusted to be your caregiver could do
right,
something like this. And
right.
it really, I mean, I've learned a lot about the foster care system through my mother, but I've watched, you know, um, her take in children. I've had conversations with a number of foster care children who have been just done dirty, and the fact that this could happen because it's unclear. Because normally when you have a story like this, you
Mhm.
see that person go on the talk shows and they're with the person. I didn't see that. I don't remember seeing him do any interviews about this movie. So
Well, okay,
that's
so
the
I
part that was
I
confusing
do
to me.
I do, and I remember it because it was a big thing. Like, in real life, it was a big
So
thing.
he did interviews though.
Yeah, yeah, they did interviews together. They talked about his story and all that stuff. Like, the movie was not the beginning. So
Mm,
yeah, I'm definitely gonna be keeping an eye on this about around that. While we talking, while we on the subject of legal, and I know this wasn't technically on our agenda, but I feel like this is a good segue to bring it up. Jonathan Majors showed up in court like a couple weeks ago, right? Because, like, Jonathan Majors, that whole thing was huge, and then all of a sudden it just wasn't. It's like everybody,
because he
not
was innocent. That's what they
everybody's
do
talking about
to black
Jonathan
men.
Majors, and then he just kind of, the whole situation just faded from the spotlight, like that. Well, just Jonathan Majors showed up in court for the first day of his trial, and the prosecution was like, we need more time." And I done heard that they don't have a case. I done heard everything from the woman that was the subject of the case has fled the country. There's a warrant
Yeah,
out for her arrest.
you've been
It's
trying to find her.
they trying to find her. She's recanting statements. So it's a whole lot going on with that, but ain't nothing being said about it. Like, now that it's very, very difficult to vilify him because the facts are just not adding up.
Right.
It has like been pushed off into the obscurity of lost news, and I just want everybody to know that he's still
But I don't
he's
even think it
still
was in the
on.
realm of news originally. It was just this happened. Him and his team was trying to get ahead of it. He's being charged. He's been arrested. Now it's fishy because you can't find her. I think they were trying to find the Uber driver, and then all those other people from when he was at was it Harvard or Princeton was starting to come out and speak on his character, and it's I don't like how news happens anymore because all someone has to say is George did this to me,
Hmm.
and we're watching that with Lizzo right now. That's all you have to say is someone did something, and there's no coming back from it. There's no even if you're found innocent, as we are watching this happen with him, like you said. So what? Okay, what's the next thing? We on Lizzo now. We're not on him anymore.
Hmm.
So after losing a lot of stuff, after losing money and things, he was supposed to be. I think he had a big thing with the United States Army. Lost that endorsement with them. Like he lost money, and this person can just live life somewhere after being a part of the accusation. I don't like it. I don't like how it's happening to Lizzo. I'm not on either side, but all these young ladies did was make a claim, and we're already vilifying. She was supposed to be a part of the Super Bowl. She's not going to be a part of the Super Bowl. There are a number of events she was supposed to be at. She's not going to be at any of those things anymore.
Hmm.
Those Some of those things have been canceled. So it's hard to believe something. That's why I don't even watch the news anymore because
So
it's no fact. It's
I would love, like, if I got famous, it would definitely be a part of my contracts that, like, if you decide to drop me because of some type of controversy and I'm vindicated, you
opinion.
gotta run me my money per the original
Oh, he
contract.
gonna have to file a lawsuit against her, like
No, I think if you
what's
put
the
it
one
in,
that we
like, now,
watching last
I
year?
wouldn't be surprised if they're starting to pop up in contracts anyway, because, you know, like, yeah, I could file a lawsuit, but we could save all that time and hassle by just having a clause in the right. There's a clause in the contract that you can drop me if I put myself in a position to make the company look bad or the product look bad, right? Like, that's standard. I think
They
what's
gonna find a
happen
loophole.
is there's going to be a standard on the other end where it's like, okay, if you make the decision to not stick by me, to drop me, to publicly, like,
Mhm.
sever ties because of a controversy or potentially negative, okay. But if I'm vindicated, you got to run me my money.
I mean that's gonna help financially,
Run me
but
money.
the scar that is public opinion is still gonna be the hard part to get. You'll have your money, you'll be able to live, but will you be able to live?
So I think you can. I mean, first of all, the money part, the tangible part, the part that affects my day to day, is all that I think really should matter, or it should be. That should be the utmost importance, right? Um, the truth is, when allegations like that are thrown out, it's going to damage your public perception. How much, how big of an impact that's going to have, I think that varies from person to person and situation to situation. And it's not really something. I don't know if it's something that you can really. I don't know what the recourse for that is,
I
but
mean, you
I
could
know.
sue. You could
I
sue.
do
I mean,
know.
like him, he's not backing down. Anybody else would have just like let this blow over. Don't go to court. Like anybody. Well, he didn't have a choice but to go to court. But anybody else would have just tried to let this blow over. But you know,
Mhm. Well, no, I see. Yo, I'm gonna be honest. Yo, like, in fairness, um, because of how this portion of the conversation started, right?
hmm
Like, the fact that you can just say anything
yeah,
in today's world and it has a tangible effect, right?
yeah,
So you make someone makes claims about Jonathan Majors in this example, and that has a major effect. But what can also be said is that, you know, that it becomes this snowball, because what I
yeah,
thought was interesting was that, like, a lot of times companies then can get called out for not severing ties or continuing to do business and or associate with people who have had these allegations thrown out at them. Um,
Mm,
so I understand why companies, just for the sake of their own self-image preservation, I understand why from some perspectives it's a good thing to just go. Let's go ahead and cut ties, right? So in the case of Lizzo, the Super Bowl, right? In the case of Jonathan Majors, he had an endorsement with the Army. I think he lost.
mm,
I think there was some acting projects that rescinded their offers to him,
right.
um, in lieu of those allegations. And I
He
get
was
why
supposed to
they
be
do that.
somebody in a
What
movie,
was
and that was
interesting, what
canceled.
was interesting though was that Disney has stuck by him, even though they have stuck by him very silently. They have not come out publicly, right?
Hmm.
But
They
not
just waiting to see.
they just waiting. And it's very clear that they're just waiting. But even that, I think, is a risky move because what will happen is you'll get people who are like, oh, Disney still, because Disney hasn't dropped him, they could
Yeah.
then find themselves a target.
But
Um,
it's so not fair because even with something like that happens, um, it's so many more people other than Majors that is in that film. The people who edited, all those people have to get their money back. People have to still get paid for stuff, and
well, I
and
mean,
many
all
of
of
the
these projects,
films
like,
already been done.
all of the things that he's doing, the things that he has done are still low. Those things are fine. What I think it was affecting,
Right.
I don't know. When you hit that stage, you probably got 3, 4 projects lined up, for scheduling purposes, right? Like you already know what your
Right.
next 3, 4 projects are, right? And what the time commitments
If
and
they
all those.
haven't already shot it.
Now, I don't. From what everything I read, I don't feel like it put the brakes on anything that was already shot. You know what I'm saying? Like even in the midst of everything that's going on, his next project is on the way. Um, that was shot before all this controversy started. I think where
Right.
it's affecting him is he's probably not filming anything right now. Well, he's not filming anything right now because they're on strike. But
You know, strike.
like
Right.
with anything that he had coming up, like that would have potentially been filming now, a lot of that I think they, was
I
pulled.
will say this
It's
is,
not
I
fair.
mean,
It's not fair.
going crazy. It came at a perfect time because he would not have been working anyway. But
Yeah, for him, right? It came at a perfect time.
yeah,
Um,
so I mean, it can. I'm dabbling in learning more about PR and marketing and branding,
mhm,
but it annoys me how the news cycle works on the professional level and the amateur level, and how all it takes is someone throwing their opinion out there, and that's it. You done. And you
that's what
definitely
they
can come
do.
back, but when you're a person of color, it's a
Mhm,
lot harder. And Lizzo is about to show us that it's not just black men that suffer, but black women suffer also.
mhm,
All you have to do, the ridiculousness of somebody saying that Lizzo fat shamed them, when
mhm,
we clearly know as artists you have to maintain your weight when you're on a show. And the on the opposite side, someone forcing you to do something, and it's coming out now that a lot of the stuff that they spoke about against her, it was
mhm,
them wanting to get the perks that everybody else was getting. So they
mhm,
dealt with it to get the perks, but they didn't feel like they should have had to deal with it to get the but perks are extra credit. They're not a part of your job.
yeah.
So you could walk away at any moment. But it just, and now the ex girlfriend of her current boyfriend is speak. It's just, it's social media gives people a
Everybody
platform
want
that
their
don't need.
15 minutes. Give me my
Right,
15.
like, so she's
Everybody,
blaming Lizzo for manipulating her boyfriend and causing him to leave her as the reason, not my boyfriend left me for someone else, or my boyfriend dumped me and now he's talking to this person, but Lizzo made him leave me. That's basically what she said on her live. And this is why.
Yeah,
But
that's where we at. That's where we at with
that's
it.
the entertainment.
Uh, Painkillers. Anybody catch Painkillers? New show on Netflix about
Hmm.
the um, OxyContin controversy. It's
Yes.
funny, the settlement, the Supreme Court ruled like they put a pause on the settlement. Um, I think, and from what I've read, it sounds like what they're really trying to do is the settlement allowed the Sacklers, the family behind OxyContin, to kind of walk away unscathed. Um, and I think they
Well, they had
paused.
to give up their. They ended up having to give up the company in a way, so they
Right.
could no longer
The company
be
is filing
in control
bankruptcy,
of
so
it.
that doesn't even matter. It's not a true loss for them. And
Right.
I think the Justice
Because they
Department
made their money.
hoping to figure out a way to really penalize them for it. But you sent me this, and I'll be honest
Mhm.
with you. I gotta say, I'm glad you did because I had no intentions on watching this. And I'm gonna tell you why.
It was interesting though.
No, no, no. Let me tell you why I wasn't interested in watching it. So this is 2023. So either earlier this year or late last year, Hulu came out with their own series around the exact same subject. It was
Yeah.
called Dope Sick.
Yeah.
Michael Keaton was one of the stars.
Hmm.
Um, Rosario Dawson was in it. Rosario Dawson played the the federal investigator um, in that version of the show.
Hmm.
So when I saw the initial previews for Painkillers, I felt like I already seen this. This is like, you know what I'm saying? Netflix's version of this same story. Both of them were very similar. They were like 6 to 8 episodes long.
Hmm.
It covered several characters involved. One of the main characters was the CEO of Purdue Pharma. Uh,
Yeah.
one of the characters was a sales rep. One of the characters was a doctor and then they were characters, people for everybody from people who got addicted to OxyContin. So it was just a whole lot of similarities. And I was like, I don't need to rewatch this, right? Like I saw the one that came out
It was
first.
different.
So then that was where I was at. I didn't have any interest. I saw that it was out, but I was like, yeah. And then you sent it to me and I was like, okay, he wants to talk about this. And
Mm.
what I think I missed, again, because I had already seen and was familiar with the story, what I think I might have missed from the trailers is that this version is very, very much centered and through the eyes and perspective of the Black woman, the federal
Hmm.
investigator who brought this to everyone's attention and really
Yeah.
fought to get the ball rolling on getting OxyContin off the shelves, but holding that family and that company accountable. And while it was touched on in Dope Sick,
Hmm.
that was not the focal point. It kind of gave very, very evened out time to the different perspectives from the CEO to the federal investigator to the doctor who started out prescribing OxyContin and then eventually gets addicted to people who got addicted and everybody in between, the sales rep with the crisis of conscience and all of those things. So this one, though, really leaned into her
Hmm.
particular character.
Right.
And so it did, like, that refocusing um, made it very different from Dope Sick. Like, even though I'm watching the same flow of events play out, watching it from this Black woman's perspective was definitely a whole different experience. So thank you for lifting that
Yeah.
up. But the show was
You feel like
phenomenal.
you
The
got more
show,
of the facts.
the show was absolutely phenomenal. You
Mm-hmm.
got more of the facts from that investigatory, just kind of like
Yeah.
recognizing the signs. There's a really powerful scene where she goes in with the data that showed like the rise in the use of Oxycontin and the rise in violent crime, carjacking,
Crime and violence,
unemployment,
employment.
homelessness, and then she compared
Yeah.
it to the 1980s, where you saw the same
Crack
trajectory,
epidemic.
the crack epidemic. Very
Mm-hmm.
powerful. Um, and just watching one of the things that you they touch on it, but there's a hyper focus in Painkillers around just that David versus Goliath type of thing, where you
Right.
have like it just really kind of touched on like how our entire society is just a slave to like whatever big money interests are going on. You know what I'm saying? Like, so through her telling the story, she tells the story very, very much like they knew what they were doing from the jump. They knew that it was dangerous. They knew that people would get addicted. They didn't care.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? They saw an
So that was
opportunity.
her burden of proof. She had to figure out how to
He
before
had to
her
figure out how,
supervisor
right,
would even
exactly.
deal
So
with it.
watching it from that more singular and focused perspective, and it still had, you still had the auxiliary characters, right? But she was absolutely the
Mm-hmm.
main character. So you still watched the character that, gets addicted. You still had a major character was one of the sales reps who eventually like turned state evidence, so to speak. Um, and then I
Mm-hmm.
thought the way that Matthew Broderick is in this one, and he plays the CEO of Purdue Pharma. And then my guy Phil Coulson from the Marvel MCU fame plays the grandfather, the man who started the company, who's dead,
Who's
and
dead?
the interaction between him and his nephew. So his nephew kind of is consulting with him, but he's not really there. But he's
Mm-hmm.
taking these cues from what he knows about how his grandfather started
He's being haunted by the
the
grandfather.
success. And what you find is that it had nothing to do with saving lives. It had nothing to do with helping people. It just had everything to do with making money. And she even goes into when, in that first episode where she talks about the roots of the company and how he was like, I want to be rich and helping people, being a doctor ain't really where it's at. I understand how to market shit, so I'm gonna go and start selling pills instead of, and how Thorazine was, it was just something that he realized he could market to make money. Not that it actually had any type of like
Well, they
net.
were losing. The grandfather had died, and they began to lose. They realized the grandfather was in debt, and
Yeah,
they had to settle on because OxyContin was not new. It was something else
oh no, no,
in
no.
a
I'm
different
I'm talking
form.
about I'm talking about the grandfather. So if you remember from the first episode, she tells the
Hmm.
story of the grandfather starting the company and how
Right.
he introduced the world to Thorazine, which was like another form of morphine, right?
Hmm.
Um, that was like for used on mental health patients, but it had no net positive
Yeah.
effect. He
And
just was a bad
volume. They created
marketer.
volume.
And Valium. That's what it was, Valium. And
Right.
Thorazine, Valium, and
So
that's how
they had multiple companies. So they were not only a pharmaceutical company. They became a pharmaceutical dealer, which was two different
yeah,
things. So they created the idea and then they marketed it to like
exactly.
doctors. But
Hmm.
the thing that I wish they would have driven home. That same family created methadone. Methadone was supposed to be the answer to or the antidote to codeine addiction.
Mm.
Oxycontin, I'm sorry. Oxycontin addiction. That same family created methadone. And
Mm.
I don't like how they made it seem so savory. Like it saved the day. Because now we're in the methadone crisis. People are now addicted to methadone.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand the scope of the movie was really to show how they got this oxycontin, but they kind of eased in the methadone. So I guess that's gonna be the next movie or the next series,
No,
the new
no.
generation, the next thing. But it was crazy to find out that that family created, that company created methadone
Mm-hmm.
on top of all those other drugs that they created, but they created oxycontin. And any of us could have been, if any of us had hurt ourselves during that period of time, we could have possibly been on
Right.
oxycontin.
That's what they would have prescribed.
That shit is scary. You could have been an oxycontin fiend right now, George, if you'd have hurt yourself.
Right.
Because that definitely was. I think we were. I know I was grown at that time. That's
Hmm.
something that could have been. That's crazy. And then they create methadone to follow up and get you off of oxycontin only after they was all these investigations and lawsuits started happening. And it really tells the truth on how pharmaceutical companies market these drugs to people and how they are not telling you the dangers of them or covering
Mm-hmm.
up the dangers of them. And it I wonder how other pharmaceutical companies pivoted after this big monumental lawsuit.
Mm.
And I hated how they just basically was saying we want to so they offered them, we want $4 billion and you have to do something, you have to get rid of the drug or whatever. And they offered them $10 million. We're gonna give this to the, and what are you gonna do to that community?
Mm-hmm.
I think, and the difference with this drug was it was happening mostly in uh, rural areas,
It
county
seemed
areas,
it
white
seemed
areas.
that one of the things I noticed was that it was definitely focused on rural, like Virginia, West Virginia, the Carolinas.
Hmm.
It's definitely rural areas that seem to be
Who knew the
affected the most.
DMV was involved in OxyContin so
Mm-hmm.
heavily?
So
That's
yeah,
a.
it
It was.
definitely.
I Did you watch it straight through, or did you have to watch it episode by
Oh yeah,
episode?
no, no, I watched it. I watched it Saturday, maybe Sunday. Yeah, but I sat down.
Yeah,
I watched it all the way through with one sitting.
yeah. I couldn't stop watching it.
It was very good.
Netflix, if it's a series, it basically takes one. They have
Mm,
their own transition, but I sit down and watch that whole thing, and it was one. It was crazy to know that it was in the DMV. It was a problem in the DMV, and it began to spread to the surrounding states, and then it started going further than that. And how
mm,
much money these people were making, and even that the doctors were involved in it. They were getting kickbacks and incentives to
hmm.
talk about it
And some of
or
them
to
knew.
promote it to their. So you
And
said they knew.
it's crazy. Yeah, a lot of the doctors, you know, a lot of the doctors knew. A lot of the doctors knew because it was very,
Yeah.
one of the things that both shows really touched on is that anyone with anyone trained in medicine in the medical community understood that opioids are addictive. That's why we
Hmm.
don't use them.
Yeah.
That's why we don't use them. Opioids are addictive. You know, That's why we
Yeah.
only prescribe them for cancer patients because they're near death, right? And we
Or
use
end
it
the
in
life care.
we use, like, morphine is the opioid. We use it in emergencies,
At the end of your life to keep you comfortable.
or if we trying to save your life, right? And pain management is one of those things. That's morphine. But uh it's widely understood in the medical community. Opioids are addictive. And most of the doctors, um, and they, Dope Sick had this scene and Painkillers had this scene where the rep is like, yeah, only one, less than 1% become addicted. And they're like, that's not possible.
It's
That's
not.
not
And
possible.
watching this film, typically like
And,
when you watch stuff like this, it's stuff that may have been outside of your time frame. But to know
mhm,
how many people I knew personally who had an oxy addiction,
mhm.
like bitch, you was lying through them teeth.
Do your teeth.
It was I love between um her brother and what the reps. I loved how they added that storyline into it because he
Mhm,
was sitting behind bars for the majority of that movie, and they were getting raises and getting new cars and new homes,
mhm. Yep.
and like it was like they were selling Avon or something.
They driving Porsches and shit. Boy, they was the Avon lady before Avon. But yeah,
I also didn't like. So you know how each one of the episodes started with a different parent, and those
yeah,
were real parents.
it
I
was a
didn't
real
like that.
story. I loved it because it
I
never
I
lets you.
hated that aspect of
It
it.
never lets you forget that you're watching a dramatization, but this really happened. This really happened to
I,
people.
that part
Uh,
theatrically, I loved it. In
mhm.
terms of it being a film, a great transition. But I hated how they made their children seem so good.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean,
I did not like that part.
I think every parent is gonna do that, especially when you lose your child. But here's the thing, yo, like good or bad, like it didn't matter
But they didn't
because
show any black parents. What
addiction.
black parents did they show?
Well, that's what's interesting. So like I noticed that, um, but then again, all of the settings that these shows have taken place in seem to be these majority white rural areas. And I'm that's
It
not
was
to
like
say
you didn't see
that's
any
not to say,
black people in it other than her and the brother.
right. Yeah. And I mean, like I don't know if that was a choice that just based on the communities that were hit the hardest. Because both of these shows, I feel like Virginia was the target. And I know there are black people in Virginia, but
Mm.
I don't know. You know what I'm saying? Like one of the things about Oxycontin, methadone, well, not so much methadone. But I guess you could lump methadone in there too. And then what is it? The amphetamine, right? Like
Yeah.
a lot of focus has been put into those drugs and a lot of prevention and that's one of the criticisms, right?
Areas.
Because the addicts for those things are not typically us. It's not to say that no black people have not had
Well, they
oxycontin
made the
addiction
black people
and
feel
things
like
like
they were the dealers of Oxycontin.
I
So
didn't
the
get that.
black people that were planted in it, like remember the guy who had the mechanic when he was fiending, he went into looked like he went into the city and went and got it from a black drug dealer. Like remember the guy in the car was black.
Nope.
That
I don't even
and
think
that,
that was something I
that's a
noticed.
harsh reality. But I just
I
don't like how it made like they all held a
but you
picture
know
of
what?
their child.
But
But
you
we also saw that we saw them their child crush snorting it.
well yeah, I mean, but that's the nature of addiction. Like crushing it and
But
snorting it
it
was
made
just.
it feel like oh poor Mao. They didn't know what they were doing. They didn't know what they were getting themselves into. They would never have just did this if this drug wasn't so addictive.
Well,
Meanwhile,
that's the very nature of
in
addiction.
jail for
You're
being a
not do
drug
those things.
dealer.
Say that again.
Meanwhile, the brother was in jail for being a drug dealer this whole movie, and she didn't get the action until the very end. The brother was no different than these people,
Mm-hmm.
and he was just a victim of his circumstance. But these people actively, and that's typically my argument when we're talking about any type of drug dealer, because you are destroying families. And because it's a pharmaceutical
So
company,
the drug dealer in this
yes,
was your doctor.
right, and
Like
those
the corner boy in
those
this
agents,
story is your doctor. So I think they're
right,
all going. I think they're
and they
all going.
kind of glance over him. They kind of glance over him. It almost felt like people didn't believe how. I mean, even the way that the pharmaceutical company attacked the people who got addicted, like they were creating a campaign for addiction. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's not what this drug is doing. Those people were already addicted.
Mm-hmm.
Like they just made so many excuses for why people were misusing the drug versus the drug is so powerful.
Yeah,
That shit was just
they took a very similar playbook from the crack epidemic, right? Like crack wasn't
yeah.
even a prescribed drug, but I feel like that playbook on attacking people as if addiction is a behavior and not a byproduct of the drug itself.
A symptom. Yeah, yeah,
Because the
yeah.
thing
It
is, you
just
have to know
it
that some of those
reinforced
kids got
that
addicted
whole
to
how
Oxycontin
they
because
made this methadone oxycontin war uh a battle, and it was a war of heads and drug dealers who sold crack
oh yeah, well
versus this
that's
oxycontin and now methadone.
yeah, that's good old white supremacy
Mm.
for you. Yeah, you know, as soon as it was the
That
governor's
shit. It
brother, it
was,
was
but
all
it. I
about.
mean,
Soon,
news.
you
But
know, you take Maryland. In Maryland, as soon as it was the governor's brother or family member who was addicted to amphetamines, it was all
right.
about prevention and getting people help and
Yeah.
being restorative. Yeah, and when it was crack in the 80s and it was blacks and Hispanics, it was a war. Yeah.
Right.
Everybody associated with
It
it
was
was
a
just
war.
hard
Yeah.
and they were criminals by nature, all of those things.
Mm.
Mhm.
It was horrible seeing her connection to the addiction,
Yeah.
and it really tells the story of how we really have to clean up. We have a lot to clean up because that crack, and I think we were kind of born in the last half of it,
Yeah.
but it really you see the devastation. But it was crazy how to see the devastation that oxycontin and now methadone has done to other cultures, family
Hmm.
circles. It was just I loved how all of it was shown, but it hurts that it's still people that look like us that's in jail for selling it and using it.
Yeah.
And
That's a big
these
problem.
people get to just right, right. And nobody is using it or allowing a reset button to happen where immediately there was a reset button and a oh my God, they would not have done this under any other circumstance. And yet, and still, with all those white voices, the pharmacy still just got a slap on the wrist.
Mm-hmm.
So
Well, that's what they're trying to prevent. So we'll see.
yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, man,
This was
tell
a
us
good. It was. I
how you
literally
feel.
watched the finish.
Yep, I did too. So tell us how y'all felt about it. If you saw Painkillers, what did you think? Let us know how you feel about the Michael Orr situation. I don't mean to laugh because it is tragic. You know what I'm saying? The blind lie. Tell us how you felt about the blind lie. You know, the caucasity.
I will definitely do our research and update that
Yeah, we're
story
gonna
and
recap.
see where
This is
it
a developing
goes.
story. So we'll have some updates for y'all next week. Thank you for joining Ben's Worthy Podcast. This is your co-host G. Oliver.
You and Nate. Peace out, people.
Next week.